The sun dipped behind the jagged horizon as Cassandra Miller stood at the gates of St. Mary's Orphanage, her twins clinging to her skirts and all her worldly possessions stuffed into one weathered carpet bag. The matron's words still rang in her ears. "You're 20 now, Miss Miller. We need the space for real orphans, not grown women who can't find proper situations." "Mama, where are we going?" 6-year-old Emily whispered, her small hand clutching the faded fabric of Cassandra's dress. Emily's brother Elijah remained silent, his solemn eyes taking in the dusty road ahead. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," Cassandra admitted, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "But we'll find somewhere." Socorro, New Mexico Territory, 1877, was not a forgiving place for a single woman with 2 children and no prospects. Cassandra had lived at St. Mary's since she was 14, working in the kitchens and tending to the younger children in exchange for shelter for herself and her twins. Born when she was barely more than a child herself, Emily and Elijah were the result of a brief romance with a passing traveler who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but growing bellies and broken dreams. The setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street as Cassandra led her tired children toward town. They had nowhere to go and night was falling fast. Socorro wasn't large, but it was busy enough with the mining operations nearby and the constant flow of travelers heading west. The saloons were already filled with rowdy voices, and Cassandra quickened her pace, pulling the twins closer to her sides. "We'll find the church," she told them, though she had no idea if the local priest would offer them sanctuary for the night. "Just a little further, my loves." "Lookin' for something, miss?" The voice came from behind her, causing Cassandra to spin around, instinctively pushing her children behind her skirts. A tall man sat atop a chestnut horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. In the dying light, she could make out a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. "Just passing through," Cassandra replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, and Cassandra could now see he was dressed in the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn leather chaps over denim trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned forearms, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. "Name's Mason Thornton," he said, tipping his hat. "Don't often see a lady and little ones wandering about this time of evening." His eyes, a deep green that reminded Cassandra of the rare pine forests in the mountains, assessed her, quickly taking in the carpet bag, her worn dress, and the twins peeking out from behind her. "Cassandra Miller," she replied, deciding honesty was her best approach. "And these are my children, Emily and Elijah. We're looking for the church. I was hoping Father Domings might offer us a place for the night." Mason's expression softened slightly. "Father Domings passed on last winter, miss. The new priest only comes through once a month." He hesitated, looking at the twins who stared back with wide, tired eyes. "Where were you staying before?" Cassandra swallowed hard. "St. Mary's Orphanage. I've been there since I was 14, working in exchange for our keep, but—" She trailed off, the humiliation of her situation washing over her anew. "But you aged out," Mason finished for her, understanding in his voice. "And they sent you on your way with those little ones." Emily stepped forward, her small chin lifted with a courage that made Cassandra's heart ache. "Mama takes good care of us," she declared. "We just need a place to sleep tonight." A smile tugged at Mason's lips as he knelt to Emily's level. "I don't doubt that for a minute, little lady." He looked up at Cassandra. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town. I've got a spare room in the back of the house. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. You and your children are welcome to stay there tonight, and we can figure things out in the morning." Cassandra hesitated. Going home with a strange man was exactly what had gotten her into trouble 6 years ago. Yet there was something steady about Mason Thornton, something in his eyes that spoke of honor rather than deception. "That's very kind, Mr. Thornton, but Mason, please, and it's no trouble. My sister would have my hide if she knew I left a woman and children with nowhere to go at nightfall." He stood and gestured to his horse. Thunderbolt here can carry the little ones and we can walk alongside. Elijah, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Is that a real cowboy horse? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mason grinned. Sure is, son. Thunderbolt's the finest cutting horse in the territory. Would you like to ride him? The boy's eyes widened, and for the first time that day, Cassandra saw a spark of excitement in her son's expression. She looked from her children to Mason and then back to the darkening town. Her options were limited and her children were exhausted. Thank you, Mr. Thornton Mason. We accept your kind offer, just for tonight. Mason helped lift the twins onto Thunderbolt's broad back, showing Elijah how to hold the reins loosely while he led the horse by its bridle. Cassandra walked beside them, watching as Mason pointed out constellations appearing in the darkening sky to her enthralled children. That there's the North Star, he explained to Elijah. If you ever get lost, you find that star and you'll know which way is north. What if it's daytime? Emily asked practically. Mason chuckled. Smart question, little miss. During the day, you can use the sun. It rises in the east and sets in the west. As they left the town behind, the land opened up before them, a vast expanse of scrubby plains against the backdrop of distant mountains. In the twilight, Cassandra could make out scattered junipers and the silhouettes of cattle grazing in the distance. The air was cooling rapidly, as it always did in the desert once the sun retreated, and she pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. Not much further now, Mason assured her, noticing her shiver. You can see the ranch lights just ahead. True to his word, a cluster of warm yellow lights soon appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, Cassandra could make out a modest but well-maintained adobe house with a covered porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and a corral held a few horses that nickered at their approach. It's not much, Mason said, a hint of pride in his voice. Started with 20 acres and a handful of cattle 5 years ago. Now I've got 300 head and 150 acres, still small compared to some spreads, but it's mine. It's beautiful, Cassandra said sincerely. After years of living in the orphanage stark confines, the ranch house with its glowing windows looked like paradise. A dog barked from the porch and bounded down to greet them. A shaggy brown mutt with one ear standing straight up and the other flopped over. That's Rusty, Mason told the twins as he helped them down from Thunderbolt. He's a good cow dog and the best rabbit hunter in the county. Emily immediately dropped to her knees to pet the friendly dog, who responded by licking her face enthusiastically. Elijah approached more cautiously but soon joined his sister, giggling as Rusty rolled over for belly rubs. Seems Rusty approves of our guests, Mason observed with a smile. He tied Thunderbolt to a hitching post and lifted Cassandra's carpetbag. Come on in, you all must be hungry. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A wooden table with 6 chairs stood near a cast iron cookstove, and a few worn but comfortable-looking armchairs were arranged before the hearth. Doorways led off to what Cassandra presumed were bedrooms. Please sit down, Mason invited, gesturing to the table as he stoked the fire in the cookstove. I'm afraid I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon. I can cook, Cassandra offered immediately. It's the least I can do to thank you for your hospitality. Mason looked up, surprise evident on his face. You've had a long day, Miss Miller. You don't need to, I insist, she interrupted gently. And please call me Cassandra. Cooking calms me and it will help me feel useful. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Kitchen's yours, then. Pantry's through there, and there's fresh milk in the icebox. I'll just see to Thunderbolt and be back to help with anything you need. Once Mason had gone outside, Cassandra quickly explored the kitchen. It was better stocked than she'd expected for a bachelor's home. The pantry held flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, and an assortment of canned goods. In the icebox, she found eggs, butter, milk, and a side of bacon. Within minutes, she had bacon sizzling in a cast iron skillet and was mixing batter for cornbread. Emily and Elijah, their initial shyness forgotten, explored the main room under Rusty's watchful eye. Cassandra kept glancing at them, still hardly believing they had found such unexpected sanctuary. Mason returned as she was sliding the cornbread into the oven. "Something smells mighty good," he commented, washing his hands at the pump sink. "Been a while since anyone but me cooked in this kitchen." "You live here alone?" Cassandra asked, stirring a pot of beans she'd found already cooked in the pantry. "Just me and the hands, but they've got their own bunkhouse. Jose and Pablo are with the herd tonight, and Michael's visiting his family in town." Mason rolled up his sleeves further and began setting the table. "My sister Catherine comes to stay sometimes, but she's teaching school over in Santa Fe now." "It must get lonely," Cassandra observed, then blushed at her forwardness. Mason met her eyes. "It can," he admitted, "but there's always work to be done, and I've got Rusty for company." As if hearing his name, the dog trotted over and settled at Mason's feet with a contented sigh. Dinner was a simple affair, but to Cassandra and the twins, who had grown accustomed to the orphanage's bland institutional fare, it was a feast. Mason entertained the children with stories of ranch life, describing cattle drives and the antics of young calves in spring. He spoke without condescension, answering Elijah's questions about horses and Emily's about the chickens he kept in a coop behind the house. "Maybe tomorrow you can help me collect eggs," he suggested to Emily, whose face lit up at the prospect. "Can we really?" she asked, looking to her mother for confirmation. "If Mr. Thornton doesn't mind," Cassandra said carefully, "but remember, we'll be moving on tomorrow." The reminder sobered her. They had sanctuary for tonight, but tomorrow they would face the same uncertainty. After dinner, Cassandra insisted on washing the dishes while Mason showed the twins the room they would share for the night. She could hear their excited voices as he pointed out a family of mice that had made a home in the barn wall, visible from the bedroom window. "They're good children," Mason said when he returned to the kitchen. "You've done well with them." Cassandra wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Thank you." "They're everything to me." She hesitated, then added, "I know what people think when they see me with them so young and unmarried, but I've never regretted having them, not for a moment." "It's not my place to judge," Mason replied quietly. "Life takes unexpected turns for all of us. What matters is how we handle those turns." He gestured to a chair. "Sit with me a while. The children are settling in with some books Catherine left here." Cassandra sat across from him at the table, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt to be alone with this man in his home as night settled fully around them. "I should thank you properly for your kindness tonight. Many men wouldn't have stopped to help." Mason poured coffee for them both. "I've needed help myself a time or two. Man can't make it alone out here." He studied her over the rim of his mug. "If you don't mind my asking, what are your plans?" The question hung between them, and Cassandra sighed. "Honestly, I don't know. I have some savings, not much, but enough for a few nights at a boarding house while I look for work. The problem is finding someone who'll hire a woman with 2 young children." "What can you do? Besides cook like an angel, I mean." His compliment brought a flush to her cheeks. "I can read and write well enough. I help teach the younger children at St. Mary's. I can sew, clean, tend a garden, nothing special, I'm afraid." Mason leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Socorro's growing. The mining operations bring in new folks every month. Mrs. Abernathy at the general store was saying just last week she needs help with her books and stocking. Her arthritis is getting worse." He took another sip of coffee. "And there's talk of starting a proper school soon. They'll need teachers." Hope flickered in Cassandra's chest. "Do you really think I might find work there?" "I think you've got as good a chance as anyone," Mason replied, and he hesitated, then continued, "I could use some help around here too." Cassandra stilled. "What kind of help?" "This place needs a woman's touch," he said, gesturing around the room. "I've been meaning to fix it up proper, but between the cattle and the land, there's never time." Catherine's always after me to hire a housekeeper, but most women don't want to live this far out from town. He met her eyes directly. I've got a small cabin about a quarter-mile from the main house. It was the original homestead. Needs some work, but it could be a proper home for you and the twins. You could keep house here, cook for me and the hands, maybe start a kitchen garden. I'd pay you fair wages and you'd have the cabin and whatever you grow. Cassandra stared at him, searching for any hint of impropriety in his offer, but found only straightforward honesty in his gaze. That's very generous, but why would you do this for strangers? Mason's expression softened. Like I said, I've needed help myself. When I first came here, I was barely 21 with nothing but a dream and a handful of scrawny cattle. Old man Rivera took a chance on me, sold me this land when others wouldn't, taught me what I needed to know. He smiled slightly. Besides, after tasting your cooking tonight, I'd be a fool to let you get away. The joke eased the tension, and Cassandra found herself smiling back. I should discuss it with the children, and I'd like to see this cabin before making any decisions. Of course. We can ride out there tomorrow morning. Mason stood and stretched. For now, you should get some rest. The bedroom across from the children's is yours for tonight. There are fresh linens in the chest. As Cassandra prepared for bed that night, after checking on her sleeping twins, she found herself filled with cautious hope. Mason Thornton seemed genuine in his offer, and the prospect of a home, however humble, was more than she had dared hope for when she stood at the orphanage gates that morning. The next day dawned clear and bright. Cassandra woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of children's laughter. She dressed quickly and found Emily and Elijah already outside, helping Mason feed the chickens. Emily clutched a basket with 3 brown eggs, her face alight with pride. "Mama, look, I got eggs for breakfast," she called when she spotted Cassandra on the porch. "Wonderful job, sweetheart," Cassandra replied, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. Her gaze met Mason's over the children's heads, and something warm unfurled in her chest at the way he watched her. After a breakfast of eggs and the leftover cornbread, Mason saddled Thunderbolt and a gentle mare named Daisy. "The cabin's not far, but it'll be quicker to ride," he explained, helping Emily up to sit in front of him on Thunderbolt while Cassandra took Elijah on Daisy. The cabin stood in a small clearing surrounded by juniper trees. It was indeed small, just one main room with a stone fireplace and a lean-to addition at the back, but Cassandra could immediately see its potential. The roof was sound, the chimney straight, and the porch, though sagging slightly at one corner, wrapped invitingly around 2 sides of the structure. "It needs work," Mason acknowledged as they dismounted. "New chinking between the logs, the porch fixed, maybe a proper bedroom built on for you." The twins could sleep in the loft. He pointed to a ladder leading to a small sleeping loft above. Cassandra stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the single window, illuminating the sparse furnishings: a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and an iron bedstead without a mattress. Yet despite its emptiness, the cabin felt welcoming. "There's a spring just behind the cabin," Mason continued, pointing through the back window. "Good water year-round, and the soil here is better than most places on the ranch. Old man Rivera's wife kept a garden that was the envy of the county right where those wildflowers are growing now." Elijah had already claimed the ladder to the loft and was calling down excitedly about the view from the small window up there. Emily was exploring the perimeter of the cabin, Rusty at her heels. "What do you think?" Mason asked quietly, watching Cassandra as she ran her hand along the mantelpiece. "I think," she turned to face him, her decision made, "I think we would be very happy here, Mr. Thornton." His face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his features from handsome to breathtaking. "Mason," he corrected gently, "if we're going to be neighbors, you should call me Mason." "Mason," she agreed, returning his smile. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Mason set to work immediately repairing the cabin, enlisting his ranch hands to help with the heavier tasks. "Jose," A skilled carpenter, in addition to being a cowhand, built proper bed frames for the twins in the loft and a larger one for Cassandra in the lean-to, which they enclosed to create a private bedroom. Pablo and Michael helped replace the sagging porch boards and re-chink the logs to keep out drafts. Cassandra, meanwhile, transformed the main house. Years of bachelor living had left their mark, but under her care, the ranch house became a home. She scrubbed floors, washed curtains, polished furniture, and organized the chaotic pantry. Mason's sister Catherine had left behind fabrics and sewing supplies, which Cassandra used to make new cushions for the chairs and curtains for the windows. The kitchen garden took shape as well. Mason brought seeds from town: tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash, and helped her turn the soil for planting. The twins took to ranch life as if born to it. Elijah followed Mason everywhere, learning about horses and cattle with an enthusiasm that delighted the cowboy. Emily discovered a talent for nurturing the chickens and collecting eggs, and soon expanded her responsibilities to include helping with the garden. Cassandra cooked for Mason and the hands, served meals in the main house, and kept everything in order. In the evenings, after the twins were asleep in the cabin, she often found herself sitting on the porch with Mason, talking as the stars appeared above them. She learned about his family back in Missouri, his dreams for the ranch, his fears during the drought 2 years earlier that nearly cost him everything. In turn, she shared her own story, her childhood in St. Louis, losing her parents to influenza when she was 13, her journey west with an aunt who died shortly after reaching New Mexico, leaving Cassandra alone at the orphanage. She even told him about Thomas, the charming drifter who had fathered her children and disappeared before they were born. "I was young and foolish," she admitted one evening, unable to meet Mason's eyes. "He told me we would marry and travel to California together. I believed him because I wanted to escape the orphanage so badly." Mason's hand found hers in the darkness. "We all make mistakes when we're young." The twins aren't a mistake, though, they're a blessing. His touch sent warmth coursing through her, and Cassandra found herself leaning slightly closer to him on the porch swing. "They are. I just wish I could give them more a proper family, a father." Mason was quiet for a long moment. "They seem happy here," he finally said. "They're thriving. Elijah's already learning to ride that pony Michael's been training, and Emily's got away with those chickens I've never seen before. They are happy," Cassandra agreed. "Happier than I've ever seen them." She hesitated, then added softly, "I'm happier too." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a breathless moment, Cassandra thought Mason might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently and stood up. "It's getting late. I'll walk you back to the cabin." As spring turned to summer, Cassandra found herself thinking of Mason in ways that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. She noticed the strength in his hands as he worked with the horses, the kindness in his eyes when he listened to Emily's stories, the patience he showed teaching Elijah to ride. At night, alone in her bed, she imagined those hands touching her, those eyes looking at her with more than friendship. But Mason, though unfailingly kind and increasingly affectionate with the twins, maintained a respectful distance from Cassandra. He never again came as close to kissing her as he had that night on the porch. She began to wonder if she had imagined the connection between them, if his generosity was nothing more than Christian charity toward a woman in need. The answer came on a sweltering July evening. Cassandra had put the twins to bed early, exhausted from a day of playing in the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. She was sitting alone on her cabin porch, enjoying the relative coolness as the sun set, when Mason appeared on the path from the main house. "Evening," he called, a basket in one hand and a bottle in the other. "Thought you might like some company, but if you're tired." "Not at all," Cassandra replied, perhaps too quickly. "Please join me." Mason settled beside her on the porch steps, setting the basket between them. "Jose's wife sent over these empanadas. Thought you might enjoy something you didn't have to cook yourself for once." The pastries were still warm, filled with spiced meat and vegetables. Mason uncorked the bottle wine, not the usual whiskey he sometimes drank with the hands, and poured 2 tin cups full. "What's the occasion?" Cassandra asked, accepting the cup with a smile. 3 months, Mason replied, raising his cup in a toast. 3 months. Since you and the twins came to the ranch, 3 months today. The fact that he had kept track touched Cassandra deeply. It feels like longer somehow, as if we've always been here. Mason took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving her face. "I can hardly remember what it was like before you came." He set his cup down, suddenly serious. "Cassandra, there's something I need to say," her heart quickened. "Yes, when I offered you the job, the cabin, my intentions were good. I wanted to help you and the twins. That was the truth." He looked down at his hands. "But these past months, watching you make a home here, seeing how you care for your children, how hard you work, my feelings have changed." Cassandra held her breath, afraid to hope. "Changed how?" Mason moved the basket aside and shifted closer to her. "I find myself thinking about you all the time. When I'm out with the herd, I'm counting the hours until I can come back and see your face. When you laugh at something Elijah says, or when you're kneading bread in the kitchen, or when you're reading to Emily on the porch. I can't look away from you." He took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I know your past makes you cautious. You have every right to be, and the twins have to be your priority. I understand that." "Mason," Cassandra began, but he shook his head. "Please, let me finish. I'm not Thomas. I'm not promising you California or adventure or anything grand. All I have is this ranch, this life. It's hard work and long days, dust in summer and freezing winds in winter, but it's real and it's mine, and—" He took a deep breath. "And I want it to be yours too, yours and the twins." Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Mason set her hand down gently and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object that gleamed in the fading light, a ring, simple but beautifully crafted, with a small pearl set between 2 tiny blue stones. "It was my mother's," he explained, holding it out to her. "Cassandra Miller, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your fierce devotion to your children. I love the way you've turned my house into a home and brought light back into my life. I love Emily's spirit and Elijah's quiet curiosity, and I want to be a father to them if they'll have me." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you make this ranch a true home, not as my housekeeper, but as my wife, my partner in everything?" Tears spilled down Cassandra's cheeks as joy bloomed in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Mason, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and this time, when their eyes met, he didn't hold back. His lips found hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened, years of loneliness melting away in the heat between them. Cassandra's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as she returned his kiss with all the passion she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Mason rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since that first night on the porch swing." "Why did you wait so long?" Cassandra asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I needed to be sure you weren't just grateful for the help. I needed you to have time to know your own mind." He kissed her again softly. "And I needed to be sure I could be the man you and the twins deserve. And are you sure now?" Mason smiled against her lips. "Never been more sure of anything in my life." They were married in the Socorro church 3 weeks later, with the entire town turning out for the celebration. Emily, resplendent in a new dress Cassandra had sewn from fabric Mason brought from Santa Fe, scattered wildflower petals down the aisle. Elijah, solemn in his new suit, carried the rings on a small pillow, his chest puffed out with importance. Jose and his wife Maria stood as witnesses, and Catherine traveled from Santa Fe to stand beside her brother. The ranch hands had decorated the church with flowers from Cassandra's garden, and Mrs. Abernathy from the general store organized a feast in the town square afterward. That night, after the twins were asleep in their new room in the main house, the cabin would now be used for visiting friends, and eventually ranch hands' families. Mason carried his bride across the threshold of their bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," he whispered, setting her gently on their bed. "I've been home since the day you found us," Cassandra replied, drawing him down for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love to come. 5 years later, the Thornton Ranch had grown to 500 acres with a herd of nearly 500 cattle. The main house had expanded to include 2 more bedrooms for the growing family. 3-year-old Matthew had arrived 9 months after the wedding, followed by 1-year-old Caroline. Elijah, now 11, was already showing promise as a cattleman, riding out with Mason whenever school allowed. Emily, equally capable on horseback, had discovered a talent for numbers and helped keep the ranch books, planning to follow her Aunt Catherine into teaching someday. On their 5th anniversary, Mason surprised Cassandra with a trip to the cabin where they had begun their journey together. He had maintained it over the years, and now it stood as a testament to their beginnings, the small home that had offered hope when Cassandra needed it most. As they sat on the porch swing he had installed the previous summer, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Mason put his arm around his wife and pulled her close. "You ever think about that day at the orphanage?" he asked softly, "when they told you to leave?" Cassandra considered the question, her head resting on his shoulder. "Sometimes. It was the worst day of my life, standing there with the twins and nowhere to go." She tilted her face up to his. "And then it became the best day of my life because it led me to you." Mason kissed her tenderly. "I think about it too. How close I came to not riding into town that evening, how easily we might have missed each other." "But we didn't," Cassandra reminded him, placing her hand over his heart. "Some things are meant to be, even when they begin in heartbreak." As the stars appeared overhead, they held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together, a desperate young mother, an honorable cowboy, and the love that had transformed them all from strangers into family.